Under the cover of night, 3 cloaked individuals would watch over the hills and looked upon Tristane Academy. The academy had already been divided since the boys had been pulled into the Tristan army in preparation for the upcoming war with Albon. However, these 3 individuals had been sent by Albon, each one for its own distinct purpose. There was Sheffield, the architect mage, and the cohort of wards. There was Benebiro, the flame sage, and finally, a young man whom they only knew of in passing, cloaked in black. He was the de facto leader among the 3. Of course, while some were more outspoken than others, they knew better than to cross this young man, because he was the key to everything. He was the second son, the chosen one of their leader, and they knew that to defy him was to question the master, and doing that would only invite their inevitable demise. So, this is Tristan Academy, the boy in black would say. Yes, the archive lies just beneath. Very well then, the young man said. Benubiro, you have your assignment. You don't have to tell me. Take the poor little girls hostage and keep them for ransom. And after I've been rewarded, leave this place nothing but burning ash and cinder. Only after I give the signal and not a moment before. Sheffield will keep up the barrier to keep out any resistance. I am not to be disturbed until I retrieve what I am looking for. And what exactly are you looking for? Benubiro would ask. Sheffield gave him a rather questionable glare. It's none of your business, you big buffoon. You weren't hired to ask questions. You were hired to do your job. You don't have to tell me. Although, I would have expected more of a challenge. Fighting with a bunch of children, and a bunch of girls at that. It's a waste of my time. Your time is what we've paid for, the man in black would say. You will do as you have been instructed, or you won't receive a single coin. The only thing you'll be given for failure is my dagger in the back of your neck. Do you understand? You know, you keep talking to me like that, kid, and that's enough, Sheffield would say. She knew all too well the type of temper that Benubiro kept, and she knew that he was the type of man who would let his tongue slip, and that would be costly. She had her assignment, and she did not want to fail her master. It was the only reason why she could even agree to such an alliance. With that, she would erect the barrier, as Benubiro would lead his renegade squad into the academy to take the girls hostage. And as for the young man in black, he would descend into the archives of Tristan Academy. There, he would find what was needed for the sake of the mission. In the meantime, both Damien and Julio would be helping out with some of the chores around campus, especially since they were so understaffed. Even when it came to things like cleaning and cooking, they knew that they had to pull their part, not just in terms of training and practicing for defense, but helping out in regular tasks as well. They would both be taken aback when they could hear the sound of explosions and the sounds of fighting. They would immediately go to investigate and see that they were under siege, and Julio would point out that a barrier had been erected around the school. It didn't take Damien long to realize that they were now under attack, and what was worse, Tai Fam was still within the village of Tristan, since that was where he was serving as its protector. And for Saito, he was at the side of Henrietta. That meant that Damien and Giulio, along with Agnes and the Musketeer force, would be the only ones on campus. And to make matters worse, due to the barrier that had been erected, members of even the Musketeer force were stuck on the outside. Damien and Giulio would have to coordinate as they made their way throughout the academy. They watched as the attackers were taking the girls hostage, obviously for some sort of ransom. Though thankfully the two boys would reconvene with Professor Colbert. Even Professor Osmond had found himself being taken in as a hostage, and that left just the three of them, and an unlikely fourth, that being in the form of Louise, who had also come tagging along, looking to help where she could. Of course, Damien was grateful that she wasn't captured at least, but still, he knew that this situation was going to be dangerous. For now, they had to focus on cutting down the barrier, but to do so, they would have to get to its focal point to allow for Colbert to be able to reverse engineer a spell capable of dispelling the force field that had been created in the first place. Once the barrier was taken down, their reinforcements could arrive, and from there, they'd have a better chance of reconvening the school. Under this scenario, both Damien and Giulio, being skilled as swordsmen and combatants, would easily dispatch of the low-level kidnappers that they came across, and they would work effectively in buying time for Colbert to be able to undo the barrier. In the meantime, Agnes and members of the Musketeer force would call for reinforcement. With Tai Fam being the closest in their vicinity, his assistance would be needed. And of course, with the power of the Green Lantern at his disposal, he would be strong enough to at least create a tiny opening within the force field, allowing for them to enter through the barrier and make their way to the academy. While on the inside, as Damien and Giulio would buy time for Colbert to undo the force field that had been created, they would be met by the leader of this renegade squad, Benubiro, who upon first look wasn't much to speak of, a man covered in burn marks and scars. He was the leader of his own mercenary team, a squad of fire mages. They were called Hellraisers, because wherever they went, ash, fire, and brimstone were sure to follow. However, the leader of this squad took note of Colbert, who seemed to have been trying to avert his gaze, while he continued to work on undoing the barrier. Of course, it wouldn't take long for him to recognize the bald-headed man with spectacles that stood before him. He knew all too well who this man was, someone from his past, someone he believed to have been dead for a long time now. Colbert, the Snake of Flames, as he was known. Of course, the others had no idea what he was referring to, but Benubiro would make all things clear. And, in an unfortunate tale of events, as Tai Fam would arrive on the outskirts, using the powers of the Lantern Ring, as Colbert was attempting to undo the barrier from the inside, he smashed down onto the barrier with the power of the Green Lantern, using multiple constructs of different drills and hammers, attempting to overpower it with brute strength and will alone. He was making small enough progress. Of course, he couldn't take down the entire barrier, but he could open just enough cracks to allow a few to slip in. Agnes, who had been charged with her squad of protecting this academy, would be the first one to race towards the academy, part of it now being set aflame from the would-be attackers. On the inside, Colbert was faced with a demon of his past in the form of Benubiro, who recognized him well. They once served together as a part of a firing squad, a group of mercenaries that worked under order of the kingdom. Long ago, they had been given a mission to wipe out a town that had become plagued with a deadly illness that, if allowed to spread, could lead to a pandemic of epic proportions. However, when Colbert arrived to the village, he found that none of the people were deathly ill as had been reported. It had all been a setup, a complete lie, an excuse to commit an unspeakable act. And unfortunately, the village that was destroyed was the home of Agnes. As Agnes made her way inside of the academy, she would hear the information unfold. As Binubiro would attempt to fight against Colbert, as Julio and Damien would try to fend them off. The only reason why he even cared to fight now was because he was a man of action. He did what he did not for the money, but for the thrill, for the chance to fight a worthy and powerful opponent. And Colbert was such a person. In their younger days, he was ruthless with the flames. He could burn down an entire city in moments, and he had perfect control. He knew just where to intensify the heat, even being able to burn down stone and metal, reducing it to nothing but burnt ashes of what it once was. Oh yes, in his days, Colbert was indeed a killer, a monster of a man. As these revelations came to light, even for Damien, it left him looking at Professor Colbert in such a different way. The kindly old professor, the person who seemed to love and care about people more than anything, that was the life he used to live. But there was more to it than that. In that moment, Damien also felt a reflection upon himself, about the man that he used to be. Now more than ever, the words of his father rang true. Was Colbert an example of someone who could change? So many examples left before him. He couldn't help but reflect on those whom he had met in his own world. He thought about the likes of people like Mr. Freeze, Two-Face, people whose lives were ruined by a bad day, a bad moment in time that led them down a trajectory, a path of a life of a criminal, a life that not many would want. But then he saw the likes of Binubiro, and he saw reflections of people like the Joker, people who only saw to cause chaos and destruction all around them, who had no case or moral compass. People like him, he wondered if there was ever even a chance for them to atone, since they clearly didn't want to. But the one that was wronged by them both, Agnes, after hearing what had been said, she went into battle with her sword drawn, a crazed state of anger that rushed over her. As Binubiro and his fellow firing squad members would engage with Damien and the others, an all-out battle would commence in the main foyer of the academy. The walls were being set aflame as fire magic was used all around them. Death and destruction, suffocating the room of life. Colbert desperately trying to undo the barrier while he was attacked over and over again. For Agnes, she was blinded with rage against Binubiro, but she also turned her attention towards Colbert. He was the one responsible. But he was also the one that saved her, the one that tried to do what was right, but there was no way they could make amends. There was no way of undoing all of the harm that had been done. Even if he had a change of heart, a conscience, it couldn't undo the death of her parents, the death of her people. That could never be forgiven. But for Colbert, he had had to make peace with those demons for a long time now. He knew that no matter how much good he did in the world, it may never replace or make up for all of the evils that he brought to the world as well. But still, he had always vowed that whatever he could do, whatever steps he took, he would try to be a better man. Even as the roof of the main foyer was collapsing upon him, he continued to focus all of his magical prowess before finally releasing and destroying the barrier that had been placed upon them. At that same moment, Agnes would strike down one of the men responsible for the destruction of her town, as she struck and killed Binubiro. Of course, Damien knew that he couldn't stop her, and there was a part of him that didn't want to. This was justice. He couldn't dispute that. But he saw that Agnes's anger did not quell with the death of the leader of the mercenaries, as she turned her blade towards Colbert, who was in a weakened state. She rushed, ready to strike him down, only to be stopped as Damien would catch her sword with his own. Get the hell out of my way, Damien. He has to. He's trying. He's trying to save everyone, Agnes. You can't do this. Not here. Why not? I've waited so long for this moment. You can't take it away from me. Are you really going to excuse what he did? So what if he became a teacher? So what if people like him? It doesn't change what he's taken from me. You're right. Damien looked back to Colbert. It doesn't change what he's done. He should stand trial for what he did. He should face the consequences of his actions. But now is not the time to... More and more of the school roof continued to collapse. Everyone had to evacuate now. Damien would grab onto Louise and the others, Agnes and everyone else attempting to escape. As they did, though, Agnes would find herself being caught under a piece of rubble. She saw as more and more of the roof was about to fall upon her, but at the last second, just like back then, Colbert came to her defense. He used the last of his strength to keep the rubble from crushing her. Whatever strength he could pour into his magic, he did so to keep it from completely destroying her in that moment. The last thing Agnes could remember before blacking out was the face of the struggling Colbert attempting to keep her alive. And by the time she had awoken, having been removed safely by Damien and the others, she saw Colbert lying on the ground, battered and beaten, burnt and bruised, and clutching his last breaths of life. Louise and the other students would gather together to mourn their teacher, and for Agnes, she was left with a strange, conflicted feeling. For one, she could never forgive him. She knew that. But at the same time, this man had saved her life twice. She wasn't sure how to feel. Would she have felt better if she had struck him down with her sword? Was sparing him the right decision? She'd never know. And it was a decision she'd never get to make. After his death, a letter would be found amongst Colbert's things. It was a letter of sorrow and repentance. He detailed a lot of his life and a lot of the things that he had done and things he had failed to do, but also the things that he was proud of. Even for all of his mistakes, he was still proud of the life that he had lived, and he could only hope that he had done right by the people that he could for the time that he had spent on the earth. He also regretted not being able to see the other worlds, the worlds that Damien and Tai Fom and Saito had described to him. Different worlds with superheroes and other powerful beings, tales of wonder and so on. He had wished that he could have had a chance to see them, but he knew that he may never get the chance to, and that maybe he didn't deserve to. For Damien, he would take time to see Agnes, to check and see how she was doing. Of course, she was still a whirlwind of emotions, and she wasn't entirely sure how to feel. She knew that she couldn't forgive Colbert for what he had done, but he meant a lot to these girls, a lot to these students. And for that, it had to have counted for something. And even for Damien, for this moment, it was one that would stick with him for a long time, because it brought so much of what he had been taught, so much of what he knew into question. About vengeance, right and wrong, what truly was justice in this world. He was always taught that it was about justice, not vengeance, that to take a life was one life too many. But in the case of people like Benabiro, or people like wards, those who could just never see reason, were their lives really worth sparing? Sure, someone could turn out like Colbert, but that didn't mean that all of them would. But in the end, did he have the right to make that decision? Did he get to decide when someone had enough chances in life? These were the questions that a hero must often grip with, as when they are called to action, everything can hang in the balance. But before long, the calls of war would now be at their doorstep, as Damien had been summoned by the Queen. The final measures were being made, but now they needed his expertise. "Your Highness," Damien said as he entered into the throne room. "I'm glad that you could arrive, Damien," Henrietta would say, Saito standing next to the throne, along with Prince Wales and a few others. "I've called you here because, specifically, I believe that your expertise will be needed." "And what exactly can I do for you?" "It's a mission. Albion will be upon us in just a short amount of time. But before then, I want to play a game of espionage." "I see. If they've had the gall to send their spies and their cohorts into my domain to try and disrupt our peace, I believe that it's only fitting that we do the same. And after giving it much thought and consideration, I believe that your skills are best suited for the task." "And what exactly is the mission that you're giving me?" "I want you and a team of your own selection to infiltrate Albion and to disrupt their fighting forces. I want to find the head of the snake and cut it off once and for all." "You know what they say about snakes, my dear," one of the royal advisors would say. "If you cut off one head, 2 more shall grow in its place. That's the Hydra, not the snake. They are both serpents, Your Highness. You must take that into account." He's right. It's not enough just to take out those who are in charge. You have to destabilize all of Albion to a point where they won't even be capable of fighting back. And you were wise to pick me. I'm best suited for it. I'll accept your mission, Your Highness. Defeating Albion and stopping this war before it even begins. However, if I'm going to do that, then there is one other thing that we're going to have to do. "And what's that?" Henrietta would ask. "Do you trust me?" "I do." "Your Highness," Damien said, looking over to Wales, "you're going to have to play a role in this." 3 days later, in the floating country of Albion, wards in Sheffield stand in the castle that was formerly home to Prince Wales. "Soon we will be upon Tristane, and war will be upon us. Glorious battle, Lord Wards. A battle that will bring you honor and fame and victory to the Master. But of course, he is the one that has given me this path. I cannot fail him. This is my chance at redemption. I will kill him. Of course you will. All you have to do is... Lord Wards, one of the guards would say, rushing into the room. Lord Wards, immediately, to the gate. The gate. You need to see this. As Wards and Sheffield would arrive to the gate, many of Albion's soldiers and other civilians were gathered together. Many who couldn't believe the sight that stood before them. As Wards finally made his way through, he saw for himself and he couldn't believe it. You're... The name's Saito Higara, but you can call me the Blue Beetle. You serve Queen Henrietta, do you not? Why have you... They saw for themselves what lied at Saito's feet. A body. But not just any body. The body of Prince Wales, with a giant hole in his chest. Yeah. Enough with the shock and awe. You said the only way to stop this war was to bring you the prince, dead or alive. Those were your words, wasn't it? Well, I don't know about you, but I don't feel like wasting my time and watching innocent people die for this asshole. You want Prince Wales? You got him. Now let's start negotiations, shall we? This concludes Familiar of Zero, Tales of the Robin. What if Robin was Louise's familiar? Season 2, Part 4. As always, if you enjoyed today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned tomorrow as we continue with Familiar of Zero, Tales of the Robin. What if Robin was Louise's familiar? Season 2, Part 5. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.